This video is intended to build on the first video we posted about completing a planner and using a planner to keep track of your assignments. Once you have that in place, then you can build on that by coming up with some good time management strategies that ultimately will help you do well in your classes and achieve your academic goals. So that's what this video is about. So when looking at time management, the importance is that you've got to consider that what you do today matters because you're exchanging a day of your life for it. So how do you want to spend your time and how do you want to make it meaningful? And so time management is intentionally bringing a structure or creating a structure for your life that allows you to spend the most amount of time on the things that are ultimately the most important for you or important to you. So time management is really about making small choices every day that sometimes require you to delay instant gratification so that you can ultimately achieve your long-term goals, which hopefully for most of you is to achieve a college degree and a college education. So, and being able to make those choices every day is easier when you have some kind of a structure that you've given yourself to follow, which is what we'll show you in a few moments. So, the challenge with that is that, of course, in high school, everyone is really structuring your time for you. You have your families looking out for you, waking you up for school, telling you where to be, making sure you're on time for things, your teachers reminding you frequently of what's due and when. And then you come to college and you feel like you have a lot of free time and a lot of freedom, and you do, and that's a great thing, but you also have to develop some responsibility to go along with that freedom so that you can achieve your goals and do well in college. So when you come to college, you have a lot of free time per se because you're not sitting in class all the time like you were in high school, about 30 hours a week. But that free time still needs to be used for schoolwork and productive things. So you're responsible for structuring that time on your own. No one is going to do it for you. So in a few moments, we'll talk about how to create a weekly schedule to accomplish things. If you have additional questions or would like assistance with making your own schedule and coming up with your own time management strategies, you can always contact the Office of Adaptive Services. Stop by and make an appointment to meet with one of the staff members. Give us a call or send us an email if you have questions or would like to set up an appointment. You can see our contact information here, so please feel free to get in touch with us if you need anything, and we will be happy to help. So this is a sample of a weekly schedule just to help give you an idea about how you can create some structure to how you manage your time and keep track of when to do things and plan ahead a little bit about when you want to do things like studying. So the first step in creating a schedule like this is always going to be to start shading out all of the times that you know you can't study. And an easy place to start with that is to mark out all of the times when you're in your classes, because of course during those times you can't do extra study time. So blocking those out, and you can see here this looks like a pretty typical first year student schedule. With 12 credit hours, so the times there are blocked out in pink. And then you can start blocking out other times that you know each day you cannot study or you won't study. So really early in the morning, if you know it's not realistic that you're going to get up at 6:30 a.m. to study, then obviously you don't want to put any study times there, so you could shade that out if you wanted to. But definitely shade out things like standing appointments you have. If there's an hour a week you know you want to go to math tutoring, then you can block that time out. If there is a time every week where you have a meeting with a student club or organization that you're involved in, then you can block that time out. So any standing appointments or commitments you have that you know are times you can't study, just go ahead and shade those out. The next step is to block out any work hours. So if you do have a job, then you want to set aside the time to work so that you know you can't study on those times. So you can see in blue on this schedule and darker blue that the work hours are shaded out. If you have a work schedule that changes every week, you never work the same days and times, then it's probably a good idea to make a new one of these every week. But if you have a pretty standard work schedule, then you could make one of these and try to follow it for a few weeks and see how it goes. So that'll help you shade out all of the times you cannot study. Then the next step really is to look at each day of the week. And again, being realistic, start shading out some times that you think you can commit to studying. And you can see here on this schedule, the study blocks are in orange, and they're 2 hours long, but they're frequent. They're scattered throughout the week on a pretty frequent basis. So part of that is because students tend to retain more information and be able to recall it better for exams later on when they study like this in shorter but more frequent bursts. So frequent exposure to the material you're trying to learn really does aid in recall and retention. Trying to study or making a study plan where you've blocked yourself out to study for 3 or 4 hours, it's also not as helpful because if you have something like that on a schedule, it's pretty unappealing. Studying for that long is not appealing, and you're more likely to procrastinate and just put it off and not do it. But this study schedule with the 2-hour blocks, or you could go shorter if you wanted, but these shorter blocks are a little bit more realistic for someone to follow and actually follow through with. So, and on this step, don't worry too much about how many hours you're putting in. Just look at each day by itself and consider, okay, on this day of the week, considering everything else I have going on, what would be some good times for me to commit to study? So go through the whole week, put those hours in. You can see here that all of the study hours, including review hours, which I'll mention in a moment, together are about double the number of hours as this student has credit hours. So they're enrolled in 12 credit hours. They have 20 plus study hours. There's not a real formula that you can follow for that, but I think that's a good place to start. There will be terms where you might need less time to study, but there are terms, depending on your classes, you might need even more than those number of hours. So this is just a starting point, but you of course have to be flexible each week depending on what you really need to get done. So once all the regular study times are put in, the green blocks, dark green blocks on this study schedule say review. I recommend putting in an hour per week per class and setting it aside, calling it review time. So what most students tend to do is take notes in class and then put them away and not really look at them, maybe even for several weeks, until it's time to really buckle down and study for an exam that's coming up within the next few days. And taking notes and then not looking at them for days or weeks at a time is really not the most effective way to study if you want to retain information and be able to recall it later for a test. So putting these explicit review times in your schedule helps you set aside time where you sit down for an hour a week per class and just focus on skimming over all of the older notes that you've been accumulating, maybe even skimming over some of your textbook readings if you do that and make highlights and take notes on your textbook readings. So looking over all the material for the course that's been accumulating that you know you're going to have to study for the test. If you spend an hour a week per class doing this, then you're really always preparing for exams instead of only preparing for exams for a few days right before the test happens. And it really makes a difference in how well you retain information, because if you don't look at notes for several weeks, when you sit down to study for an exam, it's like learning it all over again. So it's much more efficient to spend a little bit of time throughout the week, throughout the term, always being in preparation mode for the test that's coming up, even if it's a few weeks away. So after the review time, the last thing that you'll see on this schedule is planning time. And those are the beige blocks that are listed kind of late in the day on most of these days. The idea of this is that every day, whether it's in the evening or not is really up to you and your personal preferences, but every day you're sitting down, you're pulling out your planner, you're looking at what you have to do for the next day, the next week, even the next couple weeks. So you're always working far ahead on anything that might take a while to get done, bigger papers and projects. But you're looking ahead at what's coming, and you're making a to-do list for yourself for the next day. So if you're following this weekly schedule, then you might sit down on Sunday evenings about 9 o'clock, pull out your planner, look at what's coming. Again, short term, next day, but also looking a little bit more long term, so you're staying on top of bigger things. And then you're writing down in your planner or on a separate to-do list, however you choose to keep it, but you're writing down what you want to accomplish the next day. And it might include things like making an appointment, going to office hours to meet with a professor because you know you have a question, but you also definitely want to write down some things that you want to accomplish during that 5 p.m. study time you have set for Monday. So you're thinking ahead and really setting goals for yourself for the next day. Doing all of those things together helps you always stay on top of your schoolwork, always helps you be aware of what's coming so nothing falls through the cracks and you're not waiting till the last minute on things, and it really helps you be more intentional about planning how you're going to keep up with everything, and it makes a difference.